Hi everyone, this is Anto Chávez with Be Latina. Once again, we're going to have a really interesting conversation, and once again, it's about politics. This time is with Representative Jessica González from Texas, and she's actually running for re-election. So you do want to listen to all of her answers and listen to her stance and where she stands in really important issues. So let's get started. She should be joining very soon and for the conversation. Hey Jessica, how are you?
Hey, good. Sorry, I'm a little late. I've never
No,
done Instagram Live before, so this was like new for me to figure out.
don't worry about it. It's tricky. Sometimes you have to request, but it's all good. Where in the world are you right now?
I am in my living room, or no, this is like my kitchen. I am a house in Dallas.
Oh, okay, cool. So let's jump right in, shall we?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to have you introduce yourself to everyone first and just let us know who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm from Dallas. I'm an attorney. I'm also the current state representative for House District 104, which is in Dallas. The majority of it is in Dallas. It's all city of Dallas. It's about 80% Latino in my district. I'm currently serving my first term, and I am up for re-election, but I don't have an opponent. I guess I just kicked that much butt last session that I don't have anybody running against me. So I will be joining the legislature again for a second term in January 2021.
Okay, awesome. So one of the things I wanted to talk about regarding your background is the fact that you were a White House intern in the Obama administration, and you were working with immigration related matters, correct?
hmm
So were there any or are there any issues that you were addressing at the time that are still a priority to you? Has your approach changed at all?
Yeah, so when I was there, I was actually, it was after law school. And so
Hmm.
for those of you who may be watching that are interested in doing something in DC, and I would definitely recommend, if people, they like policy, or I didn't know what policy was. I learned what policy was when I went to DC, but I was actually there as a CHCI fellow. So that's the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, and they offer fellowships every year, and they're paid, right? So they also have internships that they're paid in DC. They help you find a place to live, and so I was there as the law fellow for that for 2011, 2012, and so you have the option of splitting up your fellowship. So I did the first part working with a freshman Congress member from California, Karen Bass, and that was great because I just kind of got thrown in to doing the work, and I had a quarter of her policy portfolio, and it was like I was staff. It was great. I got to learn a lot, and then I applied for the White House internship program while I was there as a fellow, and because that's unpaid, and so it is expensive to live in DC. And so the only way that I was able to really do that is because I was there under a paid fellowship program that allowed me to use, to have half of my fellowship at the White House. And so I applied, and I got accepted. And so I worked with the senior advisor on immigration policy.
Hmm.
And believe it or not, which immigration has been a big issue for a while, especially since it's been politicized when it doesn't need to be. It was only her. She had no staff. And then so I was her intern. I was like, really? You know, it's only you and I. And so, which was good for me in the sense that I got to do a lot of hands-on work with her. I was already a licensed attorney. I left my job here at the law practice that I was at, and I took a little pay cut, but I thought it was worth it. I thought it was worth it to go to DC. So I did like a variation of, I did her scheduling. I did her filing. I would clean her desk off because I was like, she's doing all the work, right? And if I can help her do her job better, right? I'm helping out. But she would let me go to any meetings that I had clearance for, and I got to do. One of my big interests was children who were separated from their families.
Hmm.
And, my boss didn't know a lot about the issue. And so I was like, well, yeah, I mean, these kids, their parents get taken away, and, they get put in two different systems because, immigration, you're dealing with federal. And then these kids get put in the family system, and, that's a state, that's a state level. And there's no communication between the two. And so parents end up losing custody of their children and going to, they end up becoming wards of the state, because they're in deportation or they're in hearings, and they don't let the parents know when there's a family court hearing for them to be able to attend, and they don't make it. I mean, they don't give you access to it. They don't want you. I mean, they just don't. And so she never realized that that was a big issue. And so there was one day that President Obama had an interview on Spanish language radio, and they had asked him about, where he stood on or what the administration was doing in regards to kids getting separated from their families. And he didn't really know. I guess it hadn't come up too much. I mean, I don't know why, but he really didn't know how to answer. And he said, well, I don't know, but we got to do something about that. So my boss said, she's like, you got your wish. And so I, wrote this, I started out, started this presidential memo to the president regarding the issue. And we were able to convene, a bunch of the folks that were involved in the different departments to talk about it, right? Because that's the thing, is that there's so many departments that, and they kind of just cross each other, but they're so interrelated. And so that has always been, I don't practice immigration law. I do civil law, but that is, when it comes to kids, I have a really soft spot for that, and no parent should ever be separated from their kids. And I'm in Texas, and so that's a big issue here, right? When we're hearing about these kids getting put in these cages, and these families getting put in these cages, and people who come here just to give their kids a better life and to raise their family. And so that is something that I do work with the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. We try to be a voice for the immigrant community. Again, I mean, it's a federal thing. So as a state elected, I mean, there's not a lot we can do other than just be vocal about it.
Yeah, well, it's really good to hear that there were some people working on this since the very beginning, and you were advocating for it, even before you started serving in public office. So you also authored the paper New State Voting Laws, Barrier to the Latino Vote.
Mm-hmm.
And you were serving as Nevada Voter Protection Director for Obama's 2012 campaign, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that experience, and how specifically did you protect the Latinx vote and fight suppression?
I actually, when I was in law school, and this is the way, like, how I got into voting rights or, voter protection work, which is something that I had never really looked into when I was in, just getting my education. But I went to do a lobby day in DC with the Hispanic Bar Association. I had held a position on the student level, and so I was there, and that was my first time ever doing any kind of lobby work. And we were lobbying the congressional members on, some issues that, the Hispanic Bar Association, wanted to lobby them on. And I met these two women. I happened to sit at their table, and they both were attorneys at DOJ in the voting rights section. And, I was coming up on my last year of law school, and they both encouraged me to apply for a fellowship. They said, we don't get a lot of Latinos that apply, especially Spanish speaking. We really need, there's really a need for that. And if you like it, then you should consider maybe applying, for a job at DOJ when you're done with law school. And so, one of my law professors, who was a mentor, kind of pushed me to apply for it. And I ended up applying for it, and I went. And that's where I, kind of got my first taste of voting rights and voter protection work, and found a love for it. And I just really got to see firsthand. And it was because of, one of those attorneys there, that she was from Puerto Rico. And so she kind of took me under her wing, her and the other attorney, and just, tried to put me in a position to where I got the most that I could out of it. And so I got to do both Section 2 and Section 5 work which Section 5 doesn't exist anymore because the Supreme Court struck it down. But, I got to see just the egregious things that people do to try to keep people from going to vote, right? For example, trying to move a polling location and it's in an area that has predominantly, maybe surrounding it, had minority folks that live there. And then they moved the polling location into a country club that you had to have membership to get into the country club.
Wow.
And so that, yeah. And so it's just that people just don't think about things like that. It just so happened that particular county was under Section 5 pre-clearance. And so they didn't, it didn't get approved. So that was kind of my first experience doing that. And then when I was a CHCI fellow, part of being a graduate fellow is, they really train you or, give you, different, professional trainings that kind of set you up to be a leader in public policy to address, issues that particularly affect the Latino community. And so as part of our, fellowship, we had to draft a white paper on an issue that was that affected the Latino community. And so I chose to do mine on voting, all these voting laws. So like in 2010, a bunch of Democrats across the country lost their seats to Republicans. And so we started seeing, a mass amount of voting legislation that was being passed to roll back access to voting. And so that's what I did my paper on, that if we have all these states that are trying to roll back, voting rights to, in particular, people of color, what does that mean for the Latino community? We're the fastest and youngest growing population. And what that means for us is that we're not going to have representation that looks like us, and people that will fight for issues that affect us, right? And so, that was one thing that I did after the White House. The Obama campaign came across my paper and asked me if I was interested in this position, and here I went to Las Vegas, and I had never even gone to Las Vegas in my life. But it was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. It taught me a lot because it's a lot of organizing. You have to come up with a plan for the entire state, and I wasn't familiar with the state, and so just creating those relationships and just making sure that a large part of it is make sure that just people are able to just access the polls, and having recruiting poll watchers to be out there and making sure that people aren't being turned away. That the election workers know that they need to offer provisional ballot because the federal law requires them to. I think one of the biggest accomplishments that I feel that aside from winning Nevada for Obama's reelection campaign, was making sure that ex-felons who had the ability to vote again, have their voting rights restored, were able to vote. And so there was about 28 folks that we worked with that were turned away. And part of that was because we had poll watchers there. And they would ask them, hey, why were you turned away? And they would let them know. And so we assisted them with that and kind of passed some of that information along to some other organizations. And out of those 28, 26 of them were able to vote on election day. And so, that was pretty incredible work that me and my staff did, and so, it happens. It happens all the time. And, unfortunately, we don't have poll workers that are always, educated, on these issues, right? That they know they need to offer provisional ballots. So, but yes, that is an issue that I continue to work on, even, here in Texas, especially as we gear up towards the November election.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's not coincidence that pretty much that's the journey that led you to run for office last year and get elected in 2019. So since then, and since you've been in office, what do you think are the major issues and pieces of legislation and just goals that you have accomplished or advocated for since you've been in office?
So one of the reasons that I decided to run was because I was really frustrated with, especially after the Trump administration started in DC, and we just started seeing multiple attacks on the immigrant community, on the LGBT community, on attacks on women's healthcare, access to women's healthcare, and even just the last legislative session in Texas before I served. We saw these same attacks. We saw the basically a Show Me Your Papers bill that came through the Texas House. We saw a bill that was an anti-LGBTQ bill that was targeting trans kids. And for me, it's like there's so many other issues that are important to the people of Texas. And why are we arguing about, where you go to the restroom, right? My district is a very safe Democrat district. And I know there's other districts around me that, aren't so blue. And so in a district like this, you can afford to elevate the discussion, right? You can afford to do that because you don't have you don't have a Republican opponent that's gonna attack you on it. And so that was really one of the goals that I wanted to accomplish, and going into the House. And it just so happened that when I got elected, I won my primary. I ran against somebody in the primary, so I guess I ran against another Democrat that had been there for about 29 years, and which is, people told me that I was crazy for even thinking about doing it, but I did, and I won. And I ended up, when I got elected, I knew that I was going to be joining the legislature, and there were going to be three LGBTQ or out members. And then come election day, we had two more, and so we had five, which is the most that we've ever had at one time in the Texas House. And so that was a big deal for the LGBT community here in Texas. And so we ended up starting a caucus. And just I think our presence there just made a big difference. And I think just the fact too that a lot of Democrats flipped some of these Republican seats, and so that really changed the temperament in the House. We didn't see so much of these attacks on these different communities. And there was one that came through, and we were able to advocate along with our allies to water that bill down so much that it really didn't do anything. But we were able to the five of us gave these very impassioned speeches at the front mic in the House. And it's a little scary, to tell 150 members and the rest of the world, give a very personal story about yourself. But I think it's impactful. It's impactful in a sense that, our queer youth, right, that they see people that are advocating, that are there fighting for them, and that they feel welcomed in the House. And so that is definitely one thing that I worked on, and I'm going to continue to work on. One of my priorities next session is to file a comprehensive non-discrimination bill, because here in Texas, you can still get legally fired from your job, denied services or housing just because you're LGBTQ or gender identity, gender orientation. And so that just needs to change. There's studies that show that an overwhelming majority of Texans don't believe in discriminating against people because they're LGBTQ. So I'm making that my top priority next session. There, I have bipartisan support, and so I really do believe that we'll be able to get it through the Texas House. And so that's going to be a big deal for us. I think it shows the progress that Texas is making as far as where our community, how our community is viewed. Another area that I plan on working on again is human trafficking. Last session I was able to double the money that went for pre and post services for human trafficking victims, and so I got very passionate about that issue when I was in the legislature. It wasn't something that I had really worked on before, but that's why it's important that lobby folks who advocates who do what they do, and they go talk to these legislators, is because you can impact somebody into a point that they're going to care. They're going to care. They're going to care your piece of legislation. And so that's what I did. I had somebody that came in, and she had been a victim of human trafficking for over 2 decades. And her story just really moved me, and just thinking about all these, how many other victims they are, and they just don't know how to get out of that life. And so I was, if I'm able to help somehow in just saving someone's life, if that is, means trying to get funding for some of these services, I definitely want to continue doing work in that area as well.
Right. And that's amazing. If we along the same lines, as the LGBTQ achievements that you've made, you're also the vice chair of this caucus. Can you tell us a little more about the duties that you have there? And also, how does your personal experience, which you talked a little bit about, but as a queer Mexican American woman, just informs the ways in which you know, make decisions when you're there?
I mean, I think as vice chair, I'm there to support, right, the chair, and our goal is to, right, not only like when there are LGBTQ related issues that come up, whether it comes to education funding for certain things. I mean, people are people. I mean, people would be very surprised on how often LGBTQ issues arise
Yeah.
in a whole host of areas. I mean, same thing with women's issues. I mean, these are all these issues are women's issues, LGBTQ issues, because they all impact us in a certain way. Now, some of these issues may impact certain communities more than others, but they impact all of us, right? And these are all human issues. But really, we're there to just be a mouthpiece for the LGBTQ Texans to make sure that we have a voice in the process, not only on the House floor, but just in other agencies that are controlled by the state. And but yeah, and just making sure and just trying to build our coalition of allies, because it's not only us five. We have, I forget how many we have now, but we have other members that are our allies. We even have one Republican member who is on the LGBTQ caucus. I think that having us there, having our presence is important for LGBTQ Texans, and it also brings a voice to the table, right? When we serve on these committees, I serve on urban affairs and I serve on the criminal jurisprudence committee. And so when you're listening to these pieces of legislation, whether you're a woman, whether I'm Latina, all these things that are who I am, they all come into play. When I'm listening to people testify, when I'm listening to this bill being rolled out, and we have the ability to ask questions. Well, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And if you're able to amend a piece of legislation, or you're able to ask questions about it, I mean, that really brings another voice to the table that wasn't there before. And so I think it's important. It's important that we have diversity across the board that is representative of our state. So that's why it's important to fill out the census. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
make that plug in there,
representation.
huh?
Yeah. No, no, yeah, yeah, that's so true. I mean, representation matters all across the board. And I think that's also tied to just local and state elections and the fact that it's not just the presidential elections, you know.
Hmm.
So, can you just share why do you think it's essential for people to pay attention to the local and state uh, elections right now?
So I'm gonna again plug in the census, because I think sometimes people don't make that connection, that we
Me
have the
too.
census every 10 years, and it's important that we get a proper count, or as close as we can to a proper count, because these determines how the census determines how districts are drawn, local districts, state districts, according to density, that certain areas may have had more people that have moved into it, and so that may mean that the district is just drawn differently. But that could also mean that a minority majority district could be drawn, right? That maybe they're especially like in places like Texas, California, places like that you have the Latino population is growing. That could mean that you can have representation that looks like you. You can
Right.
have a seat that gets drawn, that looks like you. Um, and as congressional, those are that. I mean, those are a little bit different, because that Texas, I think, stands to gain one seat. If the census is done properly, or as accurate as we can get it. And so that means that you just have more representation. You have more of a voice. You get more representatives. But at a local level, I mean, I think that at all levels, right, it's important. But I mean, even just like city council, I mean, these local seats, I mean, these are folks who determine when your trash gets picked up. These are folks who determine the city budget, right? These are folks who determine how much you pay for the services that for trash and things like that. And you could potentially elect somebody that, again, can fight for the interests of that community. Maybe they're part of that community, and so it's very important. You think of judges. You elect these judges that make decisions for both criminal court, and you want to have judges that look like the people of that area. They're going to be right. That are going to. I'm a lawyer, but so when I say this in a way that I'm saying it clearly, but I guess just having judges that have the experience and have a background that they're sympathetic, right? But of course, applying the law, but especially when you have like Dallas, that is and I think this is probably across the board, that people of color go through the criminal justice system at higher rates than the alternatives, right? And so we want to have judges in there that are going to make these decisions that the people want. Civil court, you never know if you're going to run into a situation where you have to file a lawsuit in civil court, and so you want to have judges there that are going to make decisions that they are balancing fairness and justice in a way that the community wants to see.
Right. And so with all of this at stake, why do you think the Latinx vote is imperative? Just in general, not only in local and state elections, but why is it so important that Latinx go to vote? And why is it so important for people running to reach out to Latinx populations?
We've seen these attacks from even just the administration now, right, on the Latino community, perpetuating discrimination, perpetuating hate, trying to scale back access to the polls, and we hear a lot about the Latino vote, and it's because the Latino vote, that could be a game changer if we were able to really tap into the Latino community in a way that they're listening, and they are motivated, and we give them, and we're missing the mark somehow in there. But again, every single vote matters, because we can't have another 4 years of what we've been going through right now. But again, it is electing someone who is going to represent your interests, is going to represent the interests of all communities. It's going to work for everyone. Right now, we don't have that. But I think there's a lot of and I don't know if it's just as far as like the Latino community, if there's just a lack of education, that people aren't, they aren't connecting with our community to where they can understand, everybody can understand why your vote matters. Especially, I think people just kind of think about the presidential election, but it comes down to having people that are going to advocate, and it may not happen overnight. It may not be that just because you elect someone different, or you elect someone that it's gonna happen overnight. But at least just standing up and talking about it, at least just creating the debate, that's progress. That's progress to getting where we need to be.
Yeah, and I think everybody watching this live, this is part of it. Like sending this video to your friends and family who may not have the answers to some of these questions and are doubting themselves and don't know who to vote for or what are the issues on the table. This is a great start. So with that, I think my last question to you, Jessica, would be, what are some volunteer opportunities and ways in which people can get involved?
I would look at any of the races, and I don't know if, I'm sure there's people from all over everywhere. Look at how you can get involved in the Biden campaign, in any of the state representative races in your area, and just volunteer. Give $5 if you can, and those little amounts go a long way to help some of these campaigns, to get them over the finish line. I know we have the pandemic right now, and so it's a little hard to. I feel very blessed that I don't have an election this cycle, because I would think that it would be very difficult to get out there and do some grassroots work. Yeah. But there are ways that I think that it could be done safely, and or if it's just picking up the phone and making some phone calls for a candidate. All those things go a long way, and that helps people get to the finish line. That's how I won my campaign. I mean, it took me knocking on doors, and it took my family, my friends, and I didn't realize that I knew that many people that were willing to go out there and just and work it and help me work the district. And so, we have a lot of things, a lot of things hanging in the balance right now as a country. But then also just at different state, at different levels of, different states. But, when it comes to the presidential race, I mean, even getting involved in that, it could help other candidates down the ballot. It'll bring people out and have them vote for the other candidates of, whoever you're supporting. Because I mean, we just, lost a Supreme Court justice. And I mean, and that really, that changes the makeup of the Supreme Court. We have all these other things, our voting rights, our, access to healthcare, our Supreme Court. I mean, there's so many things that, we've taken, I think that people may take advantage of because we've had them for so long. But those could be taken away. Those could be taken away really quick if they're put in the wrong hands. And so we just have a lot to lose right now, and people should vote like their life, like Kamala Harris says, like their life depends on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Don't take anything for granted, and just look up who you can help, look up the candidates that you like, and start volunteering, making some calls. Thank you so much, Jessica,
Well,
for
thank you for having
joining us
me.
at Be Latina.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Have a good night.
All right, bye.